Hello, and welcome to this video, which will present information about the rubrics mentor teachers use to evaluate student teachers in the UW College of Education. Mentor teachers in our programs are required to complete two rubrics, a midterm evaluation and a final evaluation. We will be looking at samples of the rubrics, which differ by program. We will also be exploring the outcomes on those rubrics, the 4 levels of performance, and some distinct considerations for expectations both at the midterm point of the semester and at the final point. In addition, I'll provide some look-fors on common rubric outcomes. One thing to recognize about the student teaching evaluation rubrics is that they do differ by program. So if your student teacher is in the elementary education program, you will be evaluating him or her using a specific rubric that is tied to elementary education program standards. If your student teacher is in one of the secondary education programs, there are different rubrics for each content area. Again, each rubric is tied to specific program standards. For example, the secondary mathematics education student teaching rubric is aligned to standards put forward by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Each program has standards, and the rubrics are aligned to those standards. Each mentor teacher should have received a handbook, which contains paper versions of the rubrics, as well as due dates for both the midterm and final rubrics to be completed during the student teaching semester. I will be showing you some samples of the paper versions of the rubrics in this video. When it comes time to submit both the midterm and the final rubric, you will be using LiveText, which is an online system. This course contains more information about LiveText, and this video itself will give you contact information you can use if you run into problems with submitting your evaluation through LiveText. Beginning in spring 2020, we have revised our midterm evaluations for students in both the elementary and secondary education programs. The guiding presupposition of this midterm is that all student teachers can continue to demonstrate growth throughout the entirety of student teaching. The midterm evaluation is now a 2-point rubric, meaning that the student is either demonstrating the behaviors or not. It is also accompanied by a link to a form that the mentor teacher will use in collaboration with the student teacher to set growth goals and to make plans to accomplish those goals. This image shows a small portion of the paper version of the elementary education program midterm student teaching evaluation rubric. The version of the rubric in LiveText contains the same information, but in an online format. Experienced mentors will notice that this midterm is different from previous midterms and also different from the final evaluation rubric. The purpose of the midterm is to determine where students are experiencing success and where they might be struggling. To create the 2 levels of performance, we combined the basic, proficient, and advanced levels into one basic and beyond level. And then we kept the unsatisfactory level. Since we are only at the midpoint of the semester, students may only be at the basic level, but that may be appropriate for this time. If, however, the student is unsatisfactory in a category, this is a necessary distinction that the mentor teacher needs to make and an area of growth that we need to identify for the student teacher. By doing the midterm in this fashion, we can see where the student teacher is unsatisfactory and where he or she is basic and beyond, and move more explicitly and concisely to help that student. If at the midterm a student teacher is evaluated as unsatisfactory in any rubric category, it is very likely that an improvement plan is needed. To set up an improvement plan, the mentor teacher should contact the facilitator and the UW supervisor. There are 2 steps to completing this revised midterm evaluation. Step 1 is to complete the rubric. In LiveText, the mentor teacher will complete the rubric using either unsatisfactory or basic and beyond as the 2 levels. If the student is meeting the basic and beyond descriptor as written, the mentor teacher will click on the box for basic and beyond. If, on the other hand, the student is not meeting the outcome as written, please assess the student as unsatisfactory. Any assessment of unsatisfactory should be accompanied by comments to explain the existing issues. If the student teacher has not yet had the opportunity to perform on a specific category, the mentor teacher should choose NA for not applicable. Step 2 is to set growth goals and to write concise growth plans. Within this rubric on live text, mentor teachers will be provided with a link to use to set growth goals and to write plans for addressing these goals during the remainder of student teaching. In collaboration with the student teacher, the mentor teacher should choose 3 to 5 specific rubric categories that will serve as growth goals. Again, if the student had an unsatisfactory in any area, that category should be included in the growth goals. Once the growth goal categories are selected, mentor and student teachers will collaboratively write a plan for addressing these goals during the remainder of student teaching. This collaboratively written plan will be made available to the university supervisor, who will use it for the remaining part of the semester to inform observations and assistance. This process might be a little longer than previous midterms, but it helps to give mentor and student teachers, as well as university supervisors, more information regarding strengths and weaknesses of the student teacher. Additionally, it helps to create a plan for all student teachers for the second half of student teaching. We hope that this new midterm will help all of us communicate clearly to help the student teachers continue to grow and achieve and become the teachers we know and hope they will be. At the final evaluation, it is important that you understand that the mentor teacher's final evaluation is a part of the overall student teaching grade. The grade for student teaching, which is assigned on a satisfactory or unsatisfactory basis, S or U, is determined by the UW supervisor, looking in large part at the final evaluation. There are likely to be other assignments as well that the student teacher must do, including the EdTPA, which is a performance assessment student teachers must complete. Please do remember that for most of the final evaluation rubrics, students can have no ratings of unsatisfactory and no more than 3 ratings of basic in order to successfully complete student teaching. For this reason, it is very important to keep the UW supervisor and your local facilitator informed of significant problems in the student teacher's performance so that they can be provided with support and an opportunity to improve their performance before the end of the student teaching semester. This image shows a small portion of the paper version of the Elementary Education Program rubric. The version of the rubric in live text contains the same information, but in an online format. The arrow at the top is pointing to the broad outcome, which is consistently applies important aspects of teaching developed during previous professional education courses. The second arrow is pointing to the standards, showing the alignment. The third and fourth arrows are pointing to 2 subtopics of this general outcome. The 2 you can see here are professional behavior and ethical conduct, as well as effective work with diverse learners. Of course, there are many other outcomes that will be evaluated. In this sample, we are just showing a couple of topics to get you started. Walking across the rubric, you can see that there are 4 levels of performance: unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. Each level of performance has a descriptor which provides some markers of performance at this level and for this topic. For example, if we look at the basic rating on professional behavior and ethical conduct, we can see that this rating would apply if the student teacher has incomplete knowledge of school policies, does not seek information pertaining to school policies, displays appropriate behavior, attends as minimally required, and spends no time outside of school hours. As I mentioned before, there are several different rubrics for secondary education programs depending on the content area. Again, these are aligned to meet specific program area standards. This sample is from the Secondary Mathematics Education Program, and this portion of the rubric focuses on the critical ability to provide a positive and effective classroom environment. Note the same 4 levels of performance: unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, and distinguished. By the end of the student teaching semester, we are looking for the student teacher to be proficient on all aspects of the rubric. If you look at the descriptors here, you can see that the unsatisfactory descriptors are truly problematic, with lack of attention to the classroom environment, poor planning and instruction, and inappropriate responses to student behavior, as well as the use of sarcasm. Proficient is the goal here. So here we've got consistent control of the environment, of planning and teaching practices, and in responses to student behaviors. The goal at the final evaluation will be proficient. As mentioned previously, your midterm and final evaluations will be submitted via LiveText, which is an online assessment data collection tool. We provide more information about LiveText, including how to access it and how to use it in this module. Of course, if you have problems with LiveText, you should contact us using our edquest@uwyo.edu email address or on the phone at 307-766-2230. If you run into questions or problems with the content of the evaluation, you should contact your facilitator or the UW supervisor assigned to your student teacher. It is our hope that this video has been a helpful support to you in completing midterm and final evaluations for your student teacher. As always, please contact us if you have questions, and thank you for everything you do for our students and yours.